In this video, we're going to be doing an introduction to solving for a variable. So this is Module 2, Lesson 3. And when you're solving for a variable, what you're really doing is just rearranging an equation so that a specified variable in an equation with many variables is isolated on one side of the equation. So when you solve for a specific variable, you're not going to have x equals one number. You're going to have x equals, and then it's going to be an entire expression like this on the right side of the equation. So I just want to show you a couple of examples so that when you come in tomorrow, you have an idea of what this looks like and what you need to do. So here's our first one. We're going to solve for x. It'll always tell you what you need to solve for. So in this one, 5z equals 2x plus 3y plus w. First thing you want to do, identify the term with the variable you're solving for. So where's the variable I'm solving for? It is right here, 2x. That's the term. Now, step 2 on here is to add or subtract other terms that are on the same side as the variable you're solving for. And those properties of solving that we looked at yesterday in lesson 1.1 when we justified, they work here as well. So solving for a specific variable, rearranging an equation, you have to use the equality property of addition. So here's what I mean by that. If I want to subtract 3y, I must also subtract 3y over here. Now, 5z and 3y are not like terms. So what you're left with is negative 3y plus 5z, or you could write it 5z minus 3y. Those cancel. Equals 2x plus w. Well, that term with x is still not by itself. So here's the term with the variable I'm solving for. I need to subtract w from both sides as well so that the 2x is by itself. Now again, 5z and 3y and minus w are not like terms, so I'm left with an expression, whoops, not 5x, sorry, 5z minus 3y minus w equals 2x. Okay, so now that term is by itself, that has the variable I'm solving for. So the next thing would be step 3, divide or multiply by the coefficient of the variable you're solving for. And right now the coefficient of x, what we're solving for, is 2. So I don't want it to be 2x. To solve for x, I need it to be isolated, or 1x. So I'm going to divide by 2, just like we would if we had 2x equals, 8 over here. Now, equality property of multiplication, if I'm going to divide by 2 on the right side of the equation, I must divide by 2 on the left side of the equation. However, the catch here is I have to divide everything by 2 on the left. So I'm going to rearrange this so that x comes first, x equals, and x equals this whole expression right here. 5z minus 3y minus w, all divided by 2. And that would be your solution. We've rearranged it so that x is isolated, x is by itself, x has been solved for. So let's look at another example down here. Y equals 2x plus 4z b, and I'm going to solve for z. So first of all, I want to identify where's that term with z in it. It's right there. And I'm going to subtract every other term from the right side of my equation. So minus 2x, I must subtract 2x on the left side of the equation. These are not like terms, so I have an expression now. Y minus 2x equals 4zb. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. 4z and b are all being multiplied. So I want to undo that multiplication. I'm going to divide by 4b, because 4 divided by 4 is 1. b divided by b is 1, so 1 times z times 1. Maybe I'll make a note of that. 1 times z times 1 is the identity property of multiplication. That equals z. And again, I have to divide the left side by 4b also, but I have to divide the entire left side by 4b. So what I'm left with, I'm going to write z on the left equals this entire expression on the left side of my equation. So y minus 2x all divided by 4b. And there's your solution. All right, let's look at 2 more examples just to get an idea. And just like with solving equations, just normal equations for a single value, solving these equations for a variable, there's lots of different ways you can solve. So on number 3, we're going to solve for a. Now this one's a little different than the other 2 because I want to find the term that has a in it. Well, that term is the parentheses. This is the term, the whole thing, a plus b. And how do I know that? Well, 1/2 is being multiplied times these parentheses, and h is being multiplied by the parentheses. So I need to undo this multiplication of 1/2 and h. Now, hopefully you guys realize if I have to undo multiplication of a fraction, I just multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. So that cancels. I have 2 big A equals a plus b, still in parentheses, times h. Now, I'm still looking at this term, a plus b. It's being multiplied by h. So I'm going to have to divide by h. H divided by h cancels. Divide the left side by h. So I have 2a divided by h. And now I've got that term that's the parentheses by itself. I'm only left with a plus b. Now, I'm still not done because I need to solve for a. And right now, I haven't solved for a because b is still on the right side of my equation. So, since b is being added, I'm going to subtract, or add the opposite of b. I'm going to subtract over here. Now, 2a over h and minus b are not like terms. So, I'm going to end up with an expression 2a over h minus b. b is not being divided by h because it was subtracted after h was doing division over here, equals a. And you could reorder that so a comes first, but here is your solution to that. All right, last example. And a lot of these, they end up coming from science or geometry. These are really popular. We're going to solve for h. Now, right now, h is in the denominator. So remember, if you want to get something out of the denominator, what do? And hopefully you're saying to yourself, multiply by the denominator. If you ever want to get rid of a denominator, multiply by the denominator. I'm going to multiply by this entire denominator. Multiply by the right, on the right side. Multiply by the same thing on the left side. This cancels. So now I'm just left with v squared over here. And on the left side of my equation, I have 2hg equals v squared. And you're probably thinking, if you've never seen these before, okay, that's great. How is that getting me closer to solving for h? Well, let's take a look. H is almost solved for, but it's being multiplied by 2 and by g. So we want to undo this multiplication. And hopefully you realize if we're going to undo multiplication, we're going to divide by 2 and divide by g. 2 divided by 2 is 1. G divided by g is 1. Kind of similar to a previous problem we did. And I'm also going to divide over here by 2g. So this would leave me with just h, and it equals this entire expression on the right side of my equation. Now, if this was a little overwhelming for you and a little bit new for you, that's okay. We're going to do, the only way to get better at this is to practice, practice, practice. So tomorrow when you come in, we're going to look at a lot of examples. Just keep practicing this. Hopefully what you took away from this is that the same properties that we used in 1.1 and 2.2 to solve equations are the same properties that we are using here when we are just rearranging these equations.